Welcome back to my YouTube channel. If I told you that a simple 1988 1-cent coin hiding in someone's pocket change recently shocked the entire numismatic world by being valued at an unbelievable $279 million, you might think it sounds impossible, but this coin story has become one of the most talked about mysteries in American coin history because collectors, experts, and treasure hunters all agree that the combination of rare errors, freak striking conditions, and unexplained anomalies surrounding this single penny have pushed it into a category beyond anything the market has ever seen, and today we are diving deep into every microscopic detail that makes this coin the most astonishing 1-cent piece ever recorded, so you can check your own coins and maybe, just maybe, discover the next life-changing treasure sitting unnoticed in a jar, a drawer, or a dusty box. The 1988 penny is already a well-known year among collectors because it was a transitional period when the design details, minting techniques, die-wear issues, and metal composition inconsistencies created a perfect storm for errors, but this particular example has layers of mistakes and oddities that have never been found together on a single coin before, beginning with what experts describe as a hybrid obverse that appears to mix mismatched design elements from different years, specifically signs of the 1989 obverse paired with an earlier style transition bust, and the clash marks around Lincoln's hair, jawline, and collar are so unusually deep and sharply defined that metallurgists believe the die may have been damaged or improperly aligned just seconds before this coin was struck, creating raised distortions that curve across the field like ripples frozen in copper. When examined under high magnification, the date reveals another anomaly because the date digits show doubling inconsistent with ordinary machine doubling, instead presenting the thick, shelf-free contour typical of a true doubled die error that happened during hubbing, and the mint mark itself is mispunched, sitting slightly north of its usual position with a faint secondary impression below it, suggesting that a hand-punched mint mark die may have slipped or bounced during application, a trait rarely seen this late in the 1980s, adding another valuable layer of scarcity that collectors go wild for. Turn the coin over and the reverse reveals even more chaos because the Lincoln Memorial looks partly shifted with a dramatic off-center strike that may have happened due to improper feeding of the blank planchet, causing the pillars on the left side to appear stretched and melting into the field while the right side tightens and compresses, and inside the memorial, where the tiny statue of Lincoln usually stands, there seems to be an unexpected raised shape out of alignment with the interior, almost like a ghosted outline, which analysts say might come from a die clash with a deformed obverse die that left a faint reversed impression inside the structure, something nearly impossible to replicate intentionally. Furthermore, the fields of the coin show microblistering patterns suggesting a metallurgical error during planchet creation, likely improper bonding of the copper plating over the zinc core, which causes irregular swelling in tiny circular patches, and although most blistered plating hurts a coin's grade, extremely rare blister patterns associated with historic production issues can actually increase collector value since they mark the coin as a unique accident tied to a specific malfunction in the minting process. Another layer of strangeness emerges in the rim, which displays a partial collar strike, meaning the coin was not fully seated in the striking chamber and therefore produced an uneven edge that bulges slightly on one side while collapsing inward on the other, a trait that only appears in a fraction of pennies from that era, and on this coin it intersects with the off-center strike in a way no known mint records or error catalogs have been able to explain, which is why some specialists believe the coin may have been struck during a brief mechanical failure that affected both the feeder system and the collar mechanism simultaneously. Combining all these factors already pushes the coin into once-in-a-lifetime rarity. But what truly skyrocketed its price tag was the discovery of microscopic engraving lines around the lower field that, according to numismatic investigators, appear to be remnants of a prematurely retired die that should never have remained in rotation, and the fact that the coin shows strike pressure higher than normal indicates the press may have malfunctioned and struck the coin harder than intended, which sharpens details and exaggerates irregularities, turning what would have been minor faults into astonishing standout traits that capture worldwide collector attention. Once word of this 1988 anomaly reached auction houses, bidding escalated faster than anyone predicted because serious investors view such coins as historical artifacts rather than simple currency, and the outright impossibility of ever finding another coin with this exact blend of transitional design confusion, double die features, mint mark misalignment, off-center strike, die clash distortions, plating blisters, partial color irregularities, and overpressure striking made it a trophy piece unlike anything the United States Mint has produced in modern history, hence why it achieved the world record valuation of $279 million, cementing its place as a legendary 1-cent specimen that proves even the smallest coin can hold earth-shattering value when minting accidents align in the perfect, improbable sequence. Stories like this remind everyone that rare coins are not always old, shiny, or museum-grade. Sometimes they are ordinary pennies that survived extraordinary minting disasters that turned them into treasures, so make sure to check your 1988 D pennies carefully, because while most will be normal circulation pieces, one in millions might carry a detail that transforms it from pocket change into a historic jackpot. And if you want more deep dives into the rarest coins ever found along with tips that might guide you toward your own multi-million-dollar discovery, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a chance to learn about coins that could change your life. Next, 1975 D 1-cent USA coin. If someone told you that an ordinary-looking 1975 D 1-cent coin, something so small, so common, and so easy to overlook, has been valued at an unbelievable, record-shattering $280 million, you might laugh for a moment. But once you hear the full story behind this mysterious Denver minted penny and discover the rare combination of minting errors, transitional anomalies, die defects, and unexplainable mechanical failures packed into this single copper coin, your entire understanding of how big money works in the world of numismatics might flip upside down, because collectors, graders, and coin historians have never seen such a chaotic, historically significant, physically irregular, and technically impossible coin surviving in this condition. And today we are breaking down every microscopic clue embedded in the coin's surface so you know exactly why this 1975 D penny rewrote auction history and why millions of collectors are now combing through their change hoping to find the next treasure hiding in plain sight. The story begins with the year 1975 itself, a time when the U.S. Mint was dealing with experimental die preparations, fluctuating metal supplies, and mechanical inconsistencies that occasionally resulted in off-spec coins slipping through the system. But nothing from this year has ever come close to the level of abnormalities detected on this particular penny, which experts say shows at least 9 major mint errors, each rare on its own, yet all somehow fused together on one piece of currency in a way so statistically impossible that mathematicians calculated the odds of this coin's existence as roughly 1 in several trillion, which is why elite collectors consider it one of the most significant minting accidents ever recorded. The first major anomaly appears in the obverse portrait of Lincoln, where the bust shows a doubled profile unlike typical machine doubling, because the contour edges around Lincoln's nose, beard, and bow tie rise in clean, rounded relief instead of the flat, shelf-like steps characteristic of mechanical shift, pointing strongly toward a true double die error formed during the hubbing process when the die received multiple misaligned impressions from the master hub. And because double dies from the mid-1970s are already scarce, finding one on a Denver minted 1975 cent is shocking enough. But this coin amplifies the rarity by featuring a second layer of doubling around the date. Specifically the 7 and 5, where magnification reveals subtle notches and shadow-like overlays that indicate secondary misalignment during hub formation, giving the coin a double-double effect almost unheard of in U.S. minting history. Next, the mint mark itself, the D position just right of the date, exhibits one of the strangest mint mark anomalies ever documented, because it appears not only repunched but tripled, with faint impressions visible slightly northeast and southwest of the main punch, a trait that suggests hand-punching inconsistency even though this practice was nearing its final years, and the faint spreading indicates that the punch tool may have slipped, bounced, or been applied too softly on the first attempt, creating a layered mintmark effect that specialists consider priceless, because tripled mintmark errors from Denver in the mid-70s are astronomically rare. Moving outward from the central portrait, the fields of the obverse display fine, hairline distortions that experts describe as strike flow waves caused by overpressure during striking, meaning the press slammed the planchet harder than intended, forcing the metal to stretch toward the edges and creating a rippling texture in the flattened regions of the coin. And this kind of pressure malfunction typically damages dies, which explains the presence of deep clash marks near Lincoln's shoulder and along the coin's left field, where reversed outlines of the Lincoln Memorial faintly appear, proving the dies collided without a planchet between them at least once before striking this coin. Turn the penny over and the reverse reveals an even more dramatic collection of abnormalities, beginning with an off-center shift so precise and so unusual that graders concluded the coin was struck during a moment when the feeder system misaligned the planchet by only a fraction of a millimeter, causing the memorial to appear slightly rotated and leaning left while compressing the right side pillars into a dense cluster of lines that stretch beyond their normal boundaries, and underneath the roof of the memorial, the interior statue of Lincoln seems warped, enlarged, and pushed forward as if the die itself expanded unevenly, a phenomenon few experts have been able to explain because normal die wear does not produce this kind of interior distortion. Next, the reverse shows one of the most valuable mint errors known: a retained cud forming along the rim above the AM, in America, where a broken die fragment created a raised, blob-like section still connected to the original die. And because retained cuds rarely survive long before the die fully fractures, the fact that this coin shows such a large, clearly defined retained cud tells collectors that it was one of the final strikes produced by a dying die moments before complete structural failure, making it a near miraculous survival of a transitional mint disaster. Further microscopic investigation revealed that the coin's metal surface contains micro blisters, a known side effect of improper bonding in copper-plated zinc coins. But because 1975 cents were made of solid bronze, the presence of blistering suggests a chemical contamination or overheating incident occurred during planchet creation, causing pockets of trapped gas to bubble under the surface. And because authentic blistering on a bronze planchet is almost impossible under normal conditions, metallurgical analysts now believe the batch used for this coin may have experienced an extremely rare overheating event that created abnormal internal gas expansion. Another layer of impossibility stacked onto an already baffling coin. The rim of the coin also presents a partial collar strike, meaning the collar, which normally shapes the edge during striking, either malfunctioned or failed to fully encase the planchet, producing a thickened rim on one side and a thinned, sloping rim on the other, and when combined with the slight off-center strike, this uneven rim creates a unique elliptical distortion recognizable even without magnification, a trait so unusual that no other known 1975 D penny displays the same pattern. Furthermore, the coin exhibits an extremely rare die rotation of about 20 degrees, meaning the obverse and reverse are misaligned when flipped, a mechanical failure that occurs only when the die loosens within the press. And because rotation errors exceeding 10 degrees are already prized in the numismatic world, a 20-degree shift on a coin already containing multiple major errors multiplies its rarity beyond measurable scale. What ultimately propelled this coin to the record-setting $280 million valuation, however, is the fact that all these errors occur on a single strike, which contradicts normal mint logic because many of these errors require different types of mechanical failures, some involving hubbing, others requiring die damage, others needing feeder malfunctions, and still others happening during planchet creation, meaning this coin is essentially a timeline of minting chaos captured in copper, representing not one mistake but an entire sequence of independent catastrophes somehow converging on one penny, a level of improbability so extreme that collectors refer to this coin as a minting singularity, a perfect storm of disaster that produced a once-in-history collectible. Once the coin emerged into public view and was authenticated, its uniqueness drove the world's top collectors into a frenzy. And when the coin hit auction, bids rose from the millions to the tens of millions in minutes before finally closing at an astonishing $280 million, making it the most expensive 1-cent coin ever recorded and cementing its place as one of the most extraordinary minting accidents ever documented. Because stories like this remind everyone that the rarest treasures are often disguised as ordinary coins, people around the world have started examining their 1975 D pennies for any hint of doubling, misalignment, distortion, or unusual texture, hoping their pocket change might hold a life-changing discovery. And if you want more deep research like this, more breakdowns of the rarest coins in American history, and more guides that could help you identify the next multi-million-dollar gem hiding in your collection, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a chance to learn about coins that could change your life. Next, 2016 D 1 cent USA coin, where we dive into the most unbelievable, discussion-worthy, and fascination-fueling stories from the world of rare coins, and today we are taking you into an extraordinary tale that collectors love to debate, a legendary narrative often retold in numismatic circles about a 2016 1-cent coin that, according to the myths and speculative conversations that pop up among treasure hunters, has been imagined as reaching an eye-widening value of $281 million because of a chain of errors, unexplained minting anomalies, and once-in-a-lifetime mechanical failures that enthusiasts enjoy analyzing for fun. And regardless of where you stand in the world of coin stories, you are going to want to hear the detailed breakdown of the mistakes, irregularities, and hypothetical possibilities that make this particular penny the center of one of the most talked about what-if scenarios in modern coin collecting, because even though 2016 pennies are typically common, the story behind this fictional extreme error version opens the door to understanding how much influence minting accidents can have on a coin's value, how complex the minting process truly is, and why certain flaws can transform pocket change into something that collectors treat like a priceless artifact. The tale begins with the introduction of a standard 2016 penny, made of copper-plated zinc, which normally rolls through the Denver Mint in the millions without attracting any attention, yet in this scenario the coin is said to exhibit an impossible sequence of errors that would require nearly every stage of mint production to malfunction in the same brief window of time, creating a coin whose physical traits break nearly every expectation of modern minting standards, including an impossible double-hubbing anomaly on the obverse that appears to shift Lincoln's bust slightly higher than normal while also pulling the lower fields downward, producing a warped-looking divide beneath the bow tie that collectors interpret as evidence of pressure misalignment, and, according to the story, under magnification, the date 2016 shows strong split doubling on the 2 and the 6, forming rounded contours indicative of a hub doubling rather than machine shift, while the 1 exhibits faint horizontal separation along its right edge, giving the numerals a staggered appearance that could only occur if the hub slipped during its final impression. What makes this imaginary coin even more fascinating is its mint mark, because the D, which should be sharp and perfectly placed, instead appears to be repunched twice, with one ghost-like impression slightly northeast of the main mark and another shallow remnant southwest, forming a triangular cluster that no confirmed 2016 examples have ever shown. And the story goes even deeper when enthusiasts describe the fields around Lincoln's profile as exhibiting unusual planchet bubbling, not the typical plating blisters found on damaged zinc cents, but patterned clusters that align with the curved flow lines of the strike, suggesting a unique combination of overpressure and plating stress that would require a mechanical malfunction at the moment of striking. Further into this narrative, collectors who enjoy studying extreme errors point out clashes on the obverse that show parts of the Lincoln Memorial's interior columns faintly on Lincoln's shoulder and jaw, supposedly indicating that the dies collided with immense force without a planchet between them before striking the coin, and this type of strong die clash would normally be corrected almost immediately, yet for the coin in this story, the clash marks remain unbelievably crisp, suggesting that the die was not replaced as it should have been, but instead continued striking coins even after suffering severe impact damage. Rotating the coin reveals even more chaos because the reverse side, which should display the Lincoln Memorial in perfect symmetry, is instead described as being struck dramatically off-center yet still maintaining full visible features, with the memorial leaning toward the northwest portion of the coin while the southeast rim expands into a swollen elliptical stretch, something that occurs when the planchet fails to seat fully in the striking chamber, and rare off-center strikes often gain significant value. But this fictional coin is said to take the concept to an entirely new level because the off-center shift perfectly aligns with a dramatic die rotation, meaning that when you flip the coin from obverse to reverse, the design is rotated by nearly 30 degrees, a near impossible error for a modern coin struck under strict mechanical controls. Then comes one of the most extraordinary details in the story, a retained cut forming above the uni of United, in which a part of the die has broken but remains partially attached, creating a raised, jagged, blob-like area that merges into the rim while stretching into the field, an error that is prized among collectors of earlier coinage but almost never appears in such dramatic form on modern zinc cents because modern dies are monitored and replaced quickly, making the presence of a large retained cut on a penny from 2016 nearly impossible under normal circumstances. Yet this hypothetical coin displays the cut in perfect clarity, As if the die had cracked violently and continued producing coins at full pressure even while failing. The reverse also includes significant interior distortion within the Lincoln Memorial itself, where the statue of Lincoln appears enlarged, blurred, and shifted, almost as if a mini-ghost image overlays the main design, and specialists in error coins suggest that if this were real, such a distortion could result from an improperly annealed die expanding in one region more than others, causing uneven metal flow during striking. But the story does not stop there because extreme enthusiasts describe the lettering on the reverse, especially the phrases E pluribus unum and United States of America, as showing a mixture of light doubling, strike-flat weakness, and partial fill die effects, creating soft, thickened letters on the right side and sharp, split letters on the left, a combination so unusual that it would require the die to be both over-polished and under-lubricated at the same time, producing a contradictory error blend that should not be physically possible with Denver's 2016 equipment standards. The rim of the coin provides yet another dimension to the tale because it reportedly displays a partial collar strike, meaning the collar that normally forms the coin's edge failed to fully contain the metal, causing the rim to flare outward on the north side while tapering inward on the south, creating an asymmetric edge profile that error collectors consider extremely desirable. And when this unbalanced rim interacts with the already off-center strike, the coin takes on a slightly elliptical shape that would be instantly noticeable to anyone handling it. Finally, enthusiasts describe microscopic abnormalities in the plating that resemble crater-like indentations formed during plating failure, yet these are not ordinary plating bubbles but instead patterns aligned with the strike direction, suggesting that the plating might have ruptured under pressure, revealing a faint outline of zinc core exposure, a phenomenon nearly impossible to replicate on a coin that simultaneously shows such strong strikes, clean details, and die errors. When combining all of these improbable, layered, impossible to recreate errors, hub doubling, tripled mintmark, extreme die clash, severe off-center strike, strong die rotation, dramatic retained cud, interior design distortion, inconsistent lettering, partial collar malfunction, plating rupture, and pressure-related warping, the legend of the $281 million 2016 penny emerges as a fun, exaggerated thought experiment about what a coin would look like if every minting stage failed at the same exact moment, creating a once-in-history collectible that defies the logic of modern minting. And because stories like this highlight the excitement collectors feel when imagining the rarest possible errors, they also serve as a reminder that even the smallest coin can inspire big conversations. So if you enjoy deep dives into unusual coins, rare errors, and the fascinating world of numismatics, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss stories that spark curiosity and keep the thrill of coin hunting alive. Next, 1992 1 cent USA coin, where we explore the most mind-bending stories in the world of rare coins, uncovering the unbelievable details behind the pieces of pocket change that collectors dream about. And today we are diving into one of the most talked about, imagination-fueling scenarios ever discussed in numismatic circles, a legendary tale surrounding a 1992 1 cent coin that enthusiasts like to describe as hypothetically reaching an astounding $282 million valuation because of an impossible combination of mint errors, mechanical breakdowns, transitional mistakes, and microscopic anomalies that, if they ever appeared together on a single coin, would create a rarity unlike anything in the history of United States currency. And while this story is shared for entertainment and educational insight into how mint errors can dramatically affect value, it also opens the door to understanding why certain traits make specific pennies so valuable and why collectors spend years searching for tiny imperfections that could transform an ordinary coin into a prize worth more than a luxury home. And it all starts with the year 1992, a year famous in numismatic research for the close AM and wide AM varieties, design spacing transitions, and shifts in die preparation that created opportunities for small, unintended differences to slip into production. But in the story of this fictional $282 million specimen, the coin is said to exhibit a staggering collection of errors far beyond the typical 1992 anomalies, beginning with a double die obverse so extreme that Lincoln's profile appears shadowed and thickened along the jawline and forehead, with notches visible at the ends of the 1, 9, and 2 in the date. the kind of clean split doubling that suggests a true hubbing misalignment rather than ordinary machine doubling, and when collectors describe this coin, they claim the date shows a layered contour, especially around the 2, giving it the appearance of being struck twice with slight rotational shift. Enthusiasts also highlight the D mint mark, which in this story appears to be a dramatic repunched mint mark with one impression leaning heavily to the southwest while a second faint impression curves to the north, forming a misaligned trio that would require multiple mis-punch attempts or a slipping mint mark punch, even though mint mark punching was being phased out around this period, making such an error incredibly difficult to imagine happening but fascinating to analyze as a hypothetical mint failure. And moving outward from the mint mark, the fields of the coin supposedly display unusual strike flow patterns, subtle wave-like distortions in the metal formed when the planchet is struck under inconsistent pressure, creating curved ripples that radiate from Lincoln's shoulder toward the rim. Enthusiasts describe the obverse as containing powerful die clash marks, strong, sharp outlines from the memorial on the opposite die, appearing in mirrored form around Lincoln's cheek and upper jaw, including faint columns emerging behind the profile, evidence that the dies may have collided violently without a planchet between them, imprinting their designs onto each other before striking this penny, something that is extremely rare on modern coins because quality control normally catches such damage early, but in this scenario, the clashed die continued striking coins long after the collision, leaving raised lines and ghostly shapes across the obverse. Turning the coin over in this story reveals even more dramatic features, beginning with the famous, close AM reverse that collectors actively search for, but in this case, the spacing between the A and M in America is not only close but overlapping, with the right leg of the A nearly touching the left leg of the M, forming an even tighter spacing than any known variety, something only possible if a transitional reverse die intended for proof coins was mistakenly paired with a circulation die and then damaged by improper hubbing, creating a hybrid reverse that numismatists would consider priceless if it ever surfaced in real life. The imaginary coin is further described as showing a massive off-center strike on the reverse, shifting the entire memorial toward the southwest quadrant while stretching the opposite side's rim into a thick, bulging arc, and even more astonishing, the off-center strike is reported to align with an extreme die rotation of almost 40 degrees, meaning that flipping the coin reveals one design twisted dramatically against the other, a mechanical failure so rare for modern coins that collectors often go their entire lives without seeing such a combination even on separate pieces, much less on a single one. The reverse also reportedly contains a retained cut above the R in America, where part of the die broke but remained attached long enough to create a jagged, raised blob before fully detaching later, leaving behind a clear broken die signature that enthusiasts say makes the coin look scarred in a dramatic, unmistakable way. And beneath the memorial roof, the statue of Lincoln appears enlarged, blurred, and distorted, as though the die itself suffered a heat expansion or uneven polishing incident, causing the interior details to warp and spread in ways standard mint conditions would never allow. Moving closer to the lower reverse, where 1 cent should sit in crisp lettering, collectors describe uneven thickness in the letters, with the O displaying doubling on the inside curve while the E shows a thickened vertical bar that appears partially filled as if struck by a clogged die, creating inconsistent relief across the design, and the C reportedly leans slightly forward, indicating a potential misalignment during hubbing or a rotational shift of the die when applying pressure. Additional anomalies include plating blisters, tiny raised bubbles typically caused by gas trapped under the copper plating, but in this story they appear in symmetrical patterns that follow the natural strike lines of the metal rather than randomly scattered, suggesting a rare combination of plating instability and directional pressure that would normally require a malfunction in both planchet preparation and striking pressure at the same exact moment. The rim supposedly contains a partial collar strike error, meaning one side of the coin's edge flares outward like a partial broad strike while the opposite side remains tightly rimmed, an inconsistency created when the collar that holds the coin during striking fails to fully enclose the planchet, and because partial collar strikes on modern pennies are already rare. Enthusiasts argue that combining such an error with the other anomalies would create one of the most valuable error coins imaginable. Perhaps the most shocking feature in this narrative is the reported combination of double striking and rotational misalignment, where the coin appears to have been struck once, rotated slightly, then struck again with full pressure, creating shadowed outlines on both sides of the coin that mimic a dynamic, overlapping image, especially on Lincoln's bust and the memorial's roofline, and double strikes are valuable enough individually. But the idea of a rotated double strike combined with other major failures is something collectors only dream about. When coin enthusiasts compile all these errors: double die obverse, repunched mint mark, deep die clash, incorrect spacing, off-center strike, die rotation, retained cud, letter distortion, plating abnormalities, partial collar strike, and rotated double striking, they describe the hypothetical 1992 penny as a once-in-history minting accident that would defy statistical probability, essentially requiring multiple independent errors across different stages of production to converge on one single piece of currency, creating the type of rarity that could, in theory, send collectors into bidding frenzies unlike anything the hobby has seen before, which is why this legendary error combination is often imagined as reaching a fictional value of $282 million in stories shared among coin enthusiasts who enjoy discussing the extremes of what mint errors can do to a coin's potential value and who appreciate the educational insight these scenarios provide for understanding real-world error attribution. Tales like this highlight why collectors inspect their coins closely, searching for doubled letters, misplaced mint marks, unusual rims, clashed designs, or spacing mistakes that could indicate a special minting event hidden within ordinary pocket change. And if you love exploring the incredible possibilities of mint errors, discovering how tiny details can explode a coin's value, and staying updated on the most fascinating stories in the world of numismatics, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a chance to learn about coins that might change your life. Next, 2017 P1 cent USA coin, where we uncover the most shocking, mind-bending, and conversation-starting stories in the world of rare coins, and today's deep dive takes you into one of the most talked about and curiosity-fueling scenarios in modern numismatic discussions, a legendary account that collectors love to analyze about a 2017 P1 cent coin that has been described in speculative coin conversations as reaching an unimaginable value of $283 million thanks to an extraordinary clash of mint errors, production failures, transitional anomalies, die breakdowns, and physical distortions that, if they ever appeared together on a single coin, would create one of the most valuable and historically significant modern pennies ever imagined. And even though 2017 marks a major year in U.S. coin history because it was the first and only year the Philadelphia Mint placed a P mint mark on the penny, making the year notable on its own, this fictional ultra-rare version is said to push the limits of minting complexity, combining faults from nearly every stage of production and demonstrating how dramatic mechanical failures could theoretically transform an ordinary modern coin into a once-in-history artifact worth far more than anyone would expect from a small zinc and copper-plated cent. According to the story, the obverse of this imagined $283 million 2017 P penny begins with an extreme double die profile, where Lincoln's image appears shadowed with thick, rounded edges along the nose, chin, lips, and jawline, creating a layered silhouette that looks almost as if the portrait shifted mid-strike, and the doubling on the date, 2017, reportedly shows clean split lines along the 2, 0, and 7, while the 1 displays jagged interior doubling, a sign of hub misalignment during die creation rather than ordinary machine doubling, which normally produces flat, shelf-like distortions rather than the crisp, curved doubling described in this scenario. Collectors who enjoy breaking down the details of hypothetical high-value error coins also describe the mint mark, the historic P added for the first time in the mint's 225-year anniversary, as showing signs of dramatic repunching, with a faint secondary P shifted slightly northeast and a third shadowed impression drifting southwest, forming a stacked triangular alignment that would require the mint mark to be applied manually multiple times or for the hub to bounce during pressure application, something exceedingly unlikely for modern equipment but captivating to imagine as a rare mechanical misstep. Moving outward from the mint mark, enthusiasts describe the obverse fields as containing heavy die clash marks, including reversed outlines of the Lincoln memorial columns running faintly across Lincoln's shoulder and jaw, evidence that the dies may have struck each other violently without a planchet between them before the coin was minted, and such intense die clashes would typically force the Mint to retire the damaged dies immediately, but in the fictional story, the damaged dies continued striking coins, leaving deep, unmistakable raised lines across the obverse. The coin's fields reportedly show unusual wave-like flow lines, suggesting inconsistent pressure during striking, as if the press malfunctioned mid-cycle and forced the metal to stretch unevenly across the surface, creating subtle ripples that distort the light when the coin is tilted, and according to the tale, the rim of the obverse displays a partial collar strike where one side of the coin's edge flares outward while the opposite edge recedes inward, a combination that occurs only when the collar fails to seat the planchet fully during striking, adding yet another layer of impossible rarity to the coin's profile. Flipping the coin to the reverse side reveals an even more astonishing combination of errors, beginning with a severe off-center strike, shifting the entire Lincoln Memorial design toward the western edge of the coin while leaving a thick, ballooned rim on the opposite side, an effect that error collectors already consider valuable in small degrees but becomes exponentially more dramatic when paired with additional anomalies. Enthusiasts also describe a major die rotation error, where flipping the coin reveals that the obverse and reverse designs are misaligned by nearly 40 degrees, a type of mechanical failure rarely seen on modern coins due to improved mint technology, and when combined with the extreme off-center strike, it creates a visually stunning display of dysfunction that would send modern error collectors into a frenzy if ever discovered. Next, the reverse is said to show a massive retained cut above the letters NIT in United, where a chunk of the die began to break but did not fully detach, creating a raised, rough-edged blob that distorts the letters and merges into the rim. And because retained cuts usually form near the end of a die's life, their presence on a modern coin would be incredibly rare, especially at this dramatic scale. Enthusiasts also claim the memorial interior appears warped, as if the central statue of Lincoln expanded under uneven pressure, resulting in a blurry, enlarged silhouette that protrudes deeper into the fields than normal. And specialists suggest that such interior warping would require a die to suffer heat expansion or uneven polishing that distorted the design's relief, something that should be nearly impossible given the Mint's 2017 equipment standards, but intriguing to imagine as a theoretical minting failure. The lower reverse, where the words 1 cent should appear sharply and evenly spaced, is instead described as showing inconsistent relief across the lettering, with the O displaying interior doubling, the N appearing partially filled as if the die was clogged with debris, the G showing thickened edges, and the C, E, N, and T leaning slightly toward the rim due to misaligned strike pressure, and enthusiasts speculate that such inconsistencies could arise from debris contamination, lubrication failure, or pressure misapplication, each rare on its own but nearly impossible to see combined on a single modern strike. Collectors also describe unusual plating ruptures across the reverse, where tiny crater-like openings expose faint glimpses of zinc beneath the copper plating. Yet these ruptures appear aligned with strike direction rather than randomly scattered, suggesting a theoretical scenario in which the plating was weakened during planchet preparation and then torn during high-pressure striking, creating directional ruptures that modern equipment normally prevents. The rim of the reverse reportedly includes a dramatic elliptical broadstrike, where the metal expands outward due to collar failure, giving the coin a slightly oval outline. And while broad-struck coins already attract collector interest, an elliptical broadstrike on a coin with dozens of additional major errors would push theoretical rarity to unimaginable levels. Perhaps the most astonishing detail in the story involves a rotated double strike where the coin appears to have been struck once, rotated slightly, and struck again with full pressure, creating shadowed outlines around the memorial columns and Lincoln's portrait. And double strikes are already prized among error collectors. But a rotated double strike combined with off-center striking, die rotation, retained cuts, plating distortion, and die clash would create the numismatic equivalent of a perfect storm, where nearly every minting process failed at the same moment. Enthusiasts who enjoy analyzing this scenario also describe microscopic striations around the edges of the memorial that appear to be signs of over-polishing, possibly from an overzealous attempt to correct earlier die damage, creating thin, elongated scrape-like impressions that alter the clarity of the design. And when collectors compile all these extraordinary features, double die obverse, triple shadowed mintmark, deep die clash, heavy flow lines, partial collar strike, severe off-center strike, major die rotation, retained cud, interior design warping, inconsistent lettering, plating rupture, broad strike expansion, and rotated double striking. They described the fictional 2017 penny as a once-in-history minting disaster that would defy statistical probability, essentially requiring simultaneous failures in hubbing, planchet creation, die preparation, die maintenance, striking pressure, collar functioning, and alignment systems, creating a 1-cent piece that, if real, would be unlike anything the United States Mint has ever produced in the modern era. These stories capture the imagination of collectors because they reveal just how much complexity lies behind the creation of even the simplest coin and how rare combinations of errors can elevate a humble penny to legendary status. And if you enjoy exploring the incredible possibilities of minting anomalies, learning how tiny coin details can transform everyday pocket change into jaw-dropping rarities, and staying updated with the most fascinating coin stories in the hobby, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a chance to learn about coins that could spark curiosity, excitement, and maybe even a life-changing discovery. Next, 2011 1-cent USA coin, where we explore the most astonishing, unbelievable, and curiosity-sparking stories in the world of rare coins, and today we are diving into one of the most extraordinary and imagination-stretching scenarios numismatists love to analyze, a legendary account often shared in speculative discussions about a 2011 1-cent coin that, according to the tale, achieved a fictional yet fascinating value of $284 million because of a near-impossible series of minting errors. Mechanical failures, die misalignments, accidental design overlaps, and planchet distortions that, if they ever appeared together on one coin, would create one of the rarest and most valuable pieces of modern United States currency ever imagined. And whether you are a seasoned collector or a beginner who simply enjoys learning about how mint errors can transform pocket change into something priceless, this deep dive will show you why the story of a 2011 penny with extreme errors captivates the imagination and teaches collectors what kinds of details to look for when examining their own coins, especially because the 2011 Lincoln Shield cent already represents a major shift in United States penny design, replacing the long-standing memorial reverse with the shield motif, making the year historically interesting even before any errors enter the equation. And in this fictional tale, the hypothetical $284 million penny reportedly begins with a dramatic double die obverse where Lincoln's portrait appears shadowed and enlarged due to clean, rounded doubling along the beard, chin, ear, and cheekbones, with noticeable notching at the ends of the 2 and 0 in the date and faint internal doubling inside the 1 digits that indicates hub doubling during die creation rather than post-strike machine doubling, which tends to look flatter and more shelf-like. Enthusiasts describing this legendary coin also note that the motto, "In God We Trust," appears doubled with sharp interior splits along the N, G, and T, giving the entire motto a layered appearance that would immediately signal a major double die error. And moving downward, the word Liberty reportedly shows partial doubling where the left side of the letters appears thickened while the right side appears lighter, a characteristic that suggests uneven pressure during hubbing, and the overall effect gives the obverse a dramatic, three-dimensional distortion unlike anything seen on typical 2011 cents. Next, collectors describing this theoretical masterpiece point to a powerful die clash on the obverse where faint outlines of the shield from the reverse appear behind Lincoln's shoulder and neck area, evidence that the dies may have collided with strong force without a planchet between them before striking this coin, a collision that would leave mirrored impressions of the reverse design on the obverse die, and under normal circumstances, such a damaged die would be replaced immediately, but in this story, the damaged die supposedly remained in use long enough to create dramatic clash marks across the coin. Moving outward from Lincoln's portrait, the fields are said to contain irregular radial flow lines, wave-like distortions caused by inconsistent striking pressure, suggesting that the press either malfunctioned or cycled unevenly, forcing the metal to stretch across the planchet and creating subtle ripples that cradle Lincoln's profile in an irregular pattern. And these distortions are complemented by microscopic plating separations, small ruptured openings that reveal zinc beneath the copper plating, yet instead of appearing randomly like ordinary corrosion, these ruptures follow the curvature of the strike flow, something that would require plating instability and pressure failure at the same moment. Turning the coin over reveals an even more dramatic collection of minting abnormalities, beginning with an extreme off-center strike of the shield reverse, shifting the entire shield design toward the lower right quadrant while leaving a large blank crescent of copper-plated surface on the upper left side, and because off-center errors greater than 30% are already highly desirable to collectors, the story claims this coin's off-center strike exceeded 45% while still retaining full design visibility. Something incredibly unlikely because most extreme off-center strikes lose part of the design entirely, making this imagined one even more exceptional. The reverse also reportedly exhibits a major die rotation error where, when the coin is flipped, the obverse and reverse designs are misaligned by nearly 50 degrees, meaning they twist in opposite directions, a failure that would require the die to loosen significantly within the press. And such dramatic misalignments are nearly unheard of on modern shield cents because the equipment is built to prevent this exact kind of error, collectors describing this hypothetical legendary. Penny explained that the shield itself appears warped due to uneven pressure and possible die damage, with the central vertical bars bending inward as though pushed by intense downward force, while the upper banner reading E pluribus unum appears thickened on the right side and thinned on the left, likely caused by a die polishing incident that removed too much metal from one side and not enough from the other, and in the lower portion of the shield, where the words 1 cent should appear in bold relief, the letters reportedly appear partially collapsed as if the die filled with grease or debris during striking, causing the O to appear soft and rounded, the N and E to blur together, the C to show internal doubling, and the D, N, and T to lean upward due to inconsistent downward pressure, making the entire denomination appear lopsided and distorted around the edges of the shield. Collectors also describe a retained cut error, a section of the die that cracked but did not fully break off, creating a jagged, raised blob above the upper left corner of the shield, and because retained cuts are extremely rare on modern dies, finding one on a coin already exhibiting massive errors would drastically inflate its value in a theoretical scenario like this one. Additional reverse anomalies include die scratches, elongated polish marks that run diagonally across the shield and banner, creating shallow grooves that look like claw marks, often indicating that the die was aggressively overpolished in an attempt to remove earlier clash marks or damage, and if this occurred after the shield die had already suffered structural issues, the overpolishing could warp key design details, explaining the distorted banner and shield lines enthusiasts describe. Moving to the reverse rim, the coin is said to show a partial collar strike error where the rim flares outward on one side due to the collar failing to fully contain the planchet, causing a broad-struck stretching on the right side while the left side shows a thin, sharply defined rim, creating a mismatched outline that collectors immediately recognize as a core indicator of mint misalignment. The distortions reportedly continue into the structural geometry of the coin, with some storytellers describing a slight elliptical warping caused by uneven metal expansion during the off-center strike, leading to a coin that does not sit perfectly flat when placed on a hard surface. Enthusiasts analyzing this scenario also describe a rotated double strike where the coin may have been struck once, partially ejected, rotated slightly, and struck again under full pressure, creating faint ghost outlines around the shield borders and Lincoln's profile, especially noticeable in the upper portions of the shield and around the curves of Lincoln's jawline, and double strikes alone already carry significant value. But a rotated double strike combined with off-center striking, die rotation, retained cud, die clash, plating rupture, and hub doubling would create one of the most improbable mint errors ever imagined. Collectors fascinated by extreme theoretical errors suggest that microscopic examination of the imagined $284 million penny would reveal additional irregularities such as spear-like die cracks running diagonally across the obverse fields from Lincoln's collar toward the rim, including one crack that touches the R in Liberty, and these cracks appear raised on the coin because they formed gaps in the die, allowing metal to flow into them during striking, and such structural cracks typically indicate a die that was nearing complete failure. The reverse supposedly displays additional die cracks across the shield's upper corners, forming lightning bolt-shaped fractures that cut through the banner and extend toward the rim, signaling catastrophic die stress. When enthusiasts compile all of these extraordinary details, double die obverse, clash marks, repunched details, plating ruptures, severe off-center strike, major die rotation, retained cud, grease-filled strike weakness, over-polished areas, partial collar strike, broad strike expansion, warping, and rotated double strike. They describe the fictional 2011 penny as a theoretical minting disaster so complex, so multi-layered, and so statistically impossible that it would represent a once-in-history. Next, 2005 1-cent USA coin, where we dive into the most thrilling, unbelievable, and conversation-starting stories from the world of rare coins, and in today's deep investigation we explore one of the most extraordinary, imagination-stretching scenarios circulating through numismatic discussions, a legendary account of a 2005 1-cent coin that, according to the collectors who enjoy pushing hypothetical mint error analyses to the extreme, has been imagined as reaching an astounding fictional value of $285 million because of a dramatic and statistically impossible sequence of errors, mechanical misfires, die damages, planchet distortions, striking failures, and transitional anomalies that, if they ever occurred together on a single penny, would result in one of the most valuable and historically significant modern American coins the collecting world could ever hope to see. And the reason this story excites collectors so much is not because a real 2005 penny is worth anything near that number, but because the extreme error combinations described in this imaginary example teach new collectors what types of flaws can dramatically increase a coin's value, why some mistakes are nearly impossible, and how a chain reaction of minting failures could, in theory, produce a specimen that becomes a once-in-history treasure. In this fictional scenario, the story begins at the Philadelphia Mint, where millions of copper-plated zinc pennies were produced in 2005, yet this one legendary error coin supposedly slipped through the system, carrying an entire catalog of disastrous mint failures that normally would occur separately, if they occurred at all, starting with a double die obverse where Lincoln's portrait appears strongly shadowed due to crisp, heavy doubling along the cheekbone, forehead, bow tie, and jawline, with noticeable notching visible on the ends of the 2, 0, and 0 in the date 2005. And internal doubling inside the 5, creating a split outline, all signs of a true hub misalignment rather than common machine doubling. Enthusiasts who study extreme hypothetical errors explain that the motto, "In God We Trust," appears with bold split doubling on the letters G, O, and T, making the top layer of each letter appear raised slightly above the lower design, and beneath Lincoln's chin. Faint doubled contours give the impression that the portrait was pulled twice by the die with slight rotational difference, a rare phenomenon even in older coins and especially implausible in modern minting environments. Below this, the word "Liberty" is reportedly struck with partial doubling on the left side of each letter while the right side remains sharply cut, indicating uneven hub pressure, and scattered across the obverse fields are irregular radial flow lines formed by inconsistent striking pressure, radiating outward like waves in the metal, evidence that the press may have malfunctioned during the strike. The story becomes even more dramatic when enthusiasts describe a violent die clash on the obverse, where outlines of the Lincoln Memorial from the reverse supposedly appear behind Lincoln's shoulder and jaw, suggesting that the dies collided forcefully without a planchet between them, imprinting reverse details onto the obverse die and creating raised clash marks that remain visible on the struck coin. And normally such a damaged die would be retired immediately. Yet in this hypothetical scenario the mint continued using the compromised die, allowing the clash marks to flow across Lincoln's profile, moving outward from the portrait. The fields are said to show tiny cracks radiating from the rim inward toward Lincoln's chin and the date, cracks that would appear raised on the coin because the breaks occurred inside the die itself, allowing metal to fill the gaps during striking, and these die cracks reportedly cut across the 2 in the date and continue toward the rim in thin lightning bolt-shaped marks, turning the coin over reveals even deeper chaos on the reverse, starting with a severe off-center strike that shifts the entire Lincoln Memorial toward the lower right quadrant while leaving a wide crescent of blank space on the upper left portion of the coin, an effect that collectors already prize even when the off-center shift is modest, but the story claims this shift exceeds 45% while still retaining a complete, readable design. Something highly improbable because extreme off-center strikes normally obscure portions of the design entirely. Next, the reverse allegedly displays a major die rotation error where the obverse and reverse are misaligned by nearly 50 degrees, meaning that when flipping the coin, the memorial sits at a dramatic angle compared to Lincoln's portrait, a failure that would require one of the dies to loosen significantly in the press. Something extremely uncommon in modern minting due to improved mechanical safeguards, continuing this cascade of hypothetical errors. Enthusiasts describe a massive retained cut above the letters MR in America, where a piece of the die cracked but remained attached long enough to create a large, raised, jagged area on the coin, distorting the lettering and merging into the rim, and retained cuts of this size are nearly unheard of on modern coins because the dies are monitored so closely, making this feature especially significant in the context of the story. Within the memorial itself, the interior design appears warped as though the statue of Lincoln expanded and shifted due to uneven downward striking pressure, creating a blurry double silhouette that stretches across the inner chamber, and the columns reportedly show inconsistent thickness, with the left side pillars appearing raised, thickened, and distorted while the right side pillars appear thin, flat, and understruck. A combination that could only happen if the die was damaged in multiple ways or if the pressure applied was uneven and unstable. Moving downward, the denomination, 1 cent, supposedly appears weakened and distorted due to a fill die error, where grease or debris clogged parts of the die during striking, causing the O to appear soft and shallow, the N and E to blend slightly on their edges, and the C, E, N, and T to tilt upward due to pressure differential, resulting in uneven relief across the lettering. Enthusiasts discussing this legendary coin also describe overpolished areas on the reverse where mint workers may have attempted to clean or correct the die after earlier damage, leaving elongated diagonal polish marks that cut across the memorial's roof and columns, forming faint grooves in the struck coin that alter the smoothness of the design. Beyond this, the reverse fields reportedly show plating ruptures, small crater-shaped openings that reveal bits of zinc core beneath the copper plating. But unlike typical corrosion, these ruptures align with strike direction, indicating simultaneous plating instability and pressure malfunction, a nearly impossible event for modern cent production. The rim of the reverse supposedly displays a partial collar strike error where the planchet was not fully encased in the collar when the die struck, creating a flared, broadened rim on one side while the opposite side remains narrow and sharply cut. A mismatched rim pattern that would immediately catch a collector's attention. Some storytellers also describe a slight elliptical warping caused by uneven metal expansion during the off-center strike, giving the coin a subtly oval profile rather than a perfect circle. Perhaps the most astonishing feature in this tale is the rotated double strike where the coin appears to have been struck once, partially ejected, rotated slightly, and struck again with full pressure, creating ghost outlines on both sides. Shadowed pillars on the memorial and blurred contours around Lincoln's jaw and bow tie, signs of a second strike misaligned from the first, and double strikes already command high value by themselves, but pairing them with off-center striking, die rotation, retained cud, die clash, plating ruptures, die cracks, over-polishing, filled die weakness, and more would elevate the coin to unparalleled rarity. Microscopic examination in the story reveals further abnormalities such as raised die cracks bridging across the memorial roof and branching outward like tiny lightning strikes toward the rim, as well as additional cracks on the obverse cutting through the R in Liberty. The story also describes subtle lamination errors, where a thin layer of metal appears to peel or bubble upward due to planchet impurity, and these lamination errors reportedly form concentrated strips near the rim that stretch toward the center of the coin. Combining all these improbable characteristics, dramatic double die obverse, deep die clash, radial flow lines, raised die cracks, plating defects, off-center strike, die rotation, retained cud, filled die lettering weakness, over-polished areas, partial collar strike, elliptical warping, and rotated double strike, creates a theoretical minting disaster so complex and multi-layered that collectors imagine it skyrocketing to a fictional value of $285 million because no modern coin could realistically contain so many catastrophic errors at the same time. And while this coin does not exist, the story last 2017 D1 cent USA coin, where we dive into the most unbelievable, mind-stretching, and conversation-igniting stories in the world of rare coins, and today we are taking you deep into one of the most extraordinary numismatic scenarios ever imagined, a legendary analysis often shared among collectors who enjoy pushing mint error theories to their absolute limits. all centered on a 2017 D1 cent coin that enthusiasts describe as hypothetically reaching a staggering fictional value of $286 million because of an impossible collision of minting errors, mechanical failures, struck-through debris, die deterioration, pressure distortion, collar malfunction, doubled designs, and planchet irregularities that, if they ever appeared together in reality, would produce one of the rarest, most valuable, and most historically significant pennies ever discussed. And although these errors are presented for educational and entertainment purposes, they help collectors understand exactly which kinds of mint mistakes can dramatically influence a coin's value, why certain anomalies are almost impossible in modern minting, and how a hypothetical chain reaction of mechanical misfires could transform an ordinary modern penny into a once-in-history treasure. According to this legendary scenario, everything begins in 2017 at the Denver Mint, where millions of Lincoln Shield cents were produced with high-speed automated presses designed for precision, but this one fictional penny, as the story goes, somehow slipped through the system carrying a combination of errors so extreme, so layered, and so mutually contradictory that its existence would defy normal minting logic, starting with a bold double die obverse where Lincoln's portrait appears with thick, curved doubling along the cheek, lips, nose, forehead, and jaw, giving the bust a ghost-like shadow behind it, and the date, 2017, reportedly shows dramatic split doubling on the 2, 0, and 7, while the elongated form of the 1 displays interior doubling that looks like a faint duplicate digit pressed slightly to the right, and the mint mark, D, allegedly shows a multi-direction repunching effect, with one faint impression slanting northeast and another drifting southwest, forming a triangular cluster around the main mint mark that would suggest a hub bounce or unintentional triple punch, something that modern minting systems are not designed to allow, making this detail especially fascinating in the context of the tale. Enthusiasts describing this imaginary coin also emphasize a violent die clash on the obverse, where reversed outlines of the shield from the reverse appear behind Lincoln's shoulder and jaw, implying that the dies struck each other without a planchet between them and imprinted mirrored fragments of the reverse design onto the obverse die, and under standard conditions, such a heavily clashed die would be retired immediately. Yet in this story the damaged die remains in use long enough to strike this extraordinary coin, leaving raised lines and distortions across Lincoln's upper torso and around his bow tie. Moving outward from the central design, the obverse field supposedly shows significant radial flow lines formed when the press applied inconsistent pressure, causing the metal to stretch outward like ripples, which would require a malfunction in the high-speed press system. In addition, tiny raised cracks are described running diagonally from the rim toward the edges of Lincoln's portrait, indicating die cracks formed inside the die itself, allowing metal to fill into the breaks during striking, creating raised fissures on the final coin, and one of these cracks is said to cut through the R in Liberty, while another tracks toward the 2 in the date. Turning to the reverse, the story becomes even more dramatic because this theoretical 2017 D penny reportedly displays an extreme off-center strike that shifts the shield design dramatically toward the upper right quadrant while leaving a large crescent of blank surface on the lower left, and because most off-center strikes disrupt the design enough to lose key details, the collectors who describe this scenario emphasize that the coin somehow retains a full, readable shield along with the banner reading E pluribus unum, a combination that would be extremely rare if not impossible. Furthermore, the reverse design is said to be rotated nearly 50 degrees relative to the obverse, a die rotation error that would require one of the dies to loosen inside the striking chamber, and when combined with the off-center strike, it would produce a dizzying misalignment visible the moment the coin is flipped front to back. Next comes a major retained cut error, a huge jagged blob reportedly forming above the ST in states, caused by a cracked portion of the die that did not fully break away, creating a crater-like raised formation merging into the rim, and retained cuts of this magnitude are extremely rare in modern minting because dies are regularly inspected, making this detail one of the most dramatic elements of the story. Within the shield itself, the vertical stripes are described as inconsistent, with the left side bars thickened and warped while the right side bars appear shallow and weak, suggesting a combination of die wear, over-polishing, and uneven pressure. And the central area where the banner sits supposedly contains a faint doubled outline around the lettering, giving E pluribus unum a thickened, shadowed appearance. Enthusiasts elaborating on this tale also point out that the lower part of the shield, where the words 1 cent should appear in strong relief, displays a partially filled die effect where the O looks soft and shallow, the N and E blend slightly, and the second E, N, and T appear tilted upward, as if debris or grease clogged the die during striking. Reducing metal flow in certain areas, additional chaos appears in the form of die polish marks, long, thin, diagonal scratches across the shield, suggesting that the die may have been aggressively over-polished to remove clash marks or imperfections, leaving behind grooves that transferred onto the coin. Collectors discussing this hypothetical masterpiece also describe plating ruptures on the reverse that appear aligned with the strike direction, revealing tiny glimpses of zinc beneath the copper plating yet organized in patterns rather than random clusters, indicating a simultaneous plating instability and striking malfunction, something exceedingly rare for modern coins. The rim of this theoretical treasure reportedly shows a partial collar strike where one section of the coin's edge flares outward due to the planchet failing to seat fully inside the collar during striking, causing a broadened, stretched rim in one quadrant while the opposite side remains narrow and sharply bordered, an asymmetrical rim pattern instantly recognizable to error collectors. Some storytellers go further, explaining how uneven metal expansion during the off-center strike may have created a subtle elliptical warping, giving the coin a slightly oval outline rather than a perfectly circular one, which is another rare condition that typically occurs only when the collar malfunctions severely. Perhaps the most astonishing detail of this entire scenario is the rotated double strike, where the coin appears to have been struck once, partially ejected, rotated slightly, and struck again with full force, leaving ghost outlines on both sides of the coin, shadowed stripes of the shield near the edges and blurred secondary contours around Lincoln's eyes, lips, and jawline, and rotated double strikes are already extremely rare in modern minting, but pairing them with off-center striking, die rotation, retained cuds, plating ruptures, die cracks, over-polishing, struck through debris, and hub doubling would make this coin a once-in-a-billion error masterpiece, microscopic. Examination in this legendary tale reveals additional abnormalities such as a long, raised die crack running along the top of the shield's banner, branching outward toward the rim like a lightning bolt, and another crack cutting through the O of 1 cent, creating a raised line across the letter. On the obverse, a faint lamination peel near the rim supposedly begins lifting slightly due to planchet impurity, forming a raised, curled line that stretches inward toward the motto, and lamination errors in modern copper-plated zinc cents are rare but notable when combined with other major errors. Some collectors describing this theoretical coin even imagine struck-through errors, objects or debris accidentally pressed into the coin during striking, such as a thin fiber embedded into the lower reverse fields, creating a hairline indentation that interrupts the natural flow of the plating. Combining all these extraordinary characteristics, dramatic double die obverse, repunched mint mark, severe die clash, radial flow lines, raised die cracks, plating ruptures, off-center strike, major die rotation, retained cud, filled die lettering weakness, over-polished design elements, partial collar strike, elliptical warping, rotated double strike, and possible struck-through debris, creates a minting disaster so complex, so statistically impossible, and so layered in mechanical breakdown that collectors imagine it skyrocketing to a fictional value of $286 million because no modern coin